Hi, everybody. We are just getting started. Thanks for your patience. I'm going to wait till 5:05 before we actually start talking because everybody's just jumping on right now. I'm Victoria Alexander, and I'm going to go over some housekeeping items before we get started. I'm also going to mute my other sounds so that they don't distract me because I'm easily distracted on Zoom anyway. The housekeeping items are, we're going to save questions to the end. So we'll go through a presentation, just an overview of the process. And then at the end, we're going to open it up for any questions that you might have. We'll be sharing relevant links, and there's a poll. Also, would appreciate it if you took the poll, but we'll be sharing relevant links in the chat. The chat is at the bottom. There's a little bubble, and I'm going to, there we go. Farah left a message there to say hi to everybody so you know where the chat is. After the presentation, we're going to be sending out an email with a recording of this presentation, which will be linked to YouTube. So go ahead and share the class or any information that we share with anybody you would like. We'll also be sharing our home buying handbook, which is a great guide to get you through the process, has a lot more in-depth information than this presentation will. And after this presentation, if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us and schedule a time to chat. Happy to make time to talk to you guys about anything specific, even if you're not ready. I always tell everybody, you don't have to be ready this year. You're gonna be planning this for like 3 to 5 years, and I'm happy to jump on the phone with you and talk through your specific scenario and see how we can get you to home ownership. The last thing we do is we have a blog for women-owned businesses. We do a specific blog post for Brooklyn women-owned businesses where we try to highlight them and their services or products. Just a really great platform and great SEO for both us and for the businesses to get you guys some free press. So if you know anybody that you would want to have them participate, go ahead and put them in touch with us or share your information. We can reach out to them directly if there's somebody that you love and think should be highlighted. So we're going to start at 5:05, which is just now. So I got through the housekeeping items right in time. I'm Victoria Alexander. I'm the owner of Realty Collective, a boutique real estate firm that I started 16 years ago to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate in New York City. Real estate brokers are basically your coach, your therapist, your sounding board to help you through the emotional roller coaster of buying in New York City or anywhere. So first slide, yeah. And the first thing I always tell people is to assemble your dream team. It's nice to go on Zillow and StreetEasy and start looking at property, and you should do that too so you can start familiarizing yourself with the listings that are going to be available in the neighborhood you're interested in. But the first thing you're going to do is assemble your dream team. So I'm going to start it off with passing it off to Lisa and take it from there.
Sorry, hi, I was just unmuting myself. I'm Lisa. I am a loan officer at Cross Country Mortgage. I've been in the business for a little over 7 years. Cross Country Mortgage is a private mortgage bank. So that means it works just like the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. I particularly love working with first-time home buyers. I do loans in New York is really my focus. I also do loans throughout the tri-state area and around the country. And I 100% agree with what Victoria said at the beginning. It's really important to just have a conversation up front. I'm actually closing someone last week that we started talking 4 years ago about buying something, and it feels really good. So I'm really looking forward to answering your questions and seeing how I can help you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashida Sadiq. I'm a real estate attorney. I've been practicing in New York for probably going on 18 years now. I'm both licensed in New Jersey. I represent a lot of first-time buyers, so I really encourage you to ask questions. And hopefully the information we're giving to you will be very helpful. My office is located downtown Brooklyn. I represent clients in all of the boroughs, as I said, in New Jersey, also in Long Island as well. I tell clients it's kind of like a roller coaster. You've been looking for your property, you find your property, and then you're at the beginning and you're ready to sign this contract and get to your closing. And we're here to hopefully give you as much information before you get on that line or as you think of getting on that line to the roller coaster. So look forward to sharing information.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Just a little background. I started this Buying into Brooklyn seminar almost 14 years ago. We used to do it in person at the Brooklyn Brewery, and our sponsor was Brooklyn-based The Blog. And over COVID, we decided to bring this workshop online. I had done the workshop with Lisa and Rashida previously. Over the 14 years, it's changed up a little bit, but I really thought it was super important because after some crazy things, I made a dedication to try to support other women in the industry and developed the team with Rashida and Lisa. And we've done more than, 2 or 3 dozen deals together, mostly during COVID and through this workshop. So I'm really just important to me to work with other strong women that are educated and have the same sort of perspective on and customer service level that I have working with my clients. So that's how we got this class going from an in-person class to an online class a couple years ago now, because 2 years ago is COVID. And I think it's been really great because we can just reach so many more people that can't physically be here. The other things that I want to talk about, so Lisa and Rashida talked a little about their role in the process, but my role is as your real estate broker is I'm your advocate. I advocate for you. When you walk into a listing, that broker that's representing the property, they're there and have a fiduciary responsibility and are advocating for the seller's needs and goals. I advocate for your needs and goals and the help coach you through the process of getting to home ownership. I said you're looking at my notes, sorry. I started this company 16 years ago. I'm mostly focused on Brooklyn, but I have known to help buyers in Long Island. Right now I have a deal up in Washington Heights. So I'm all over the place, especially when it works with buyers. It's easy to be flexible with that. My job is to be your matchmaker to find your dream home and help you get to closing. There is no cost to my services. The seller pays the brokers. It's included in their closing costs. You're going to pay for it regardless. So you may as well have somebody working for you. And I'm going to protect you from your own instincts because those sometimes get in the way of in the real estate process. And I'm sure everybody knows how stressful moving and buying in New York City real estate is. So the biggest thing about having a team of people working for you that know each other well and have worked together for a while is that we're going to make the process as simple and calm and collected as possible. And there will be the least amount of stressors from our end because we've worked together for so many times. There's no personalities to get in the way. And I talked about my services don't cost anything to the buyer. So the 3 people you need are your buyer's broker, your attorney, and your mortgage professional. And those are 3 people you need for purchasing a home in New York City. Might not need all those people in another state because like in places like California, you don't have a lawyer as part of your process. But in New York City, those are the 3 people we highly suggest you getting yours together. And you can interview all of us. This is a job. You want to make sure that personality types go along with your own. Make sure this is a smooth transaction for everybody. And make sure that people have pick advisors that have a long history in the industry so that they have relationships with the other lawyers, mortgage professionals, and brokers that are going to be of service to you. Those relationships and networking are really valuable. And so if you're working with somebody that just got their broker's license, make sure they're on a team so that you can know that they have the advice of seasoned agents behind them. So that's my and don't hire your uncle as your lawyer. Those are my industry tips when you're going to hire your dream team. So next slide, why buy now? The rent's too high. You want your own design. Every time you're paying rent, you're paying somebody else's mortgage, not your own mortgage. So you want to build your own equity. So interest rates are so low right now, historically low, right, Lisa? And rent has never been closer to your mortgage payment. So the mortgage payment, you're paying $3,000-$4,000 in rent, probably get something similar and pay around $3,000-$4,000 for your mortgage. It's not out of this world. Next, let's see what the numbers say. Next slide. There's the rent versus buy matrix. This is a calculator provided by the New York Times and say, I'm going to be in New York 7 years. This is what the interest rates would be. This is what I pay in rent. And they'll tell you, is buying right for you? They're going to crunch the numbers and say, maybe you shouldn't because you're going to move to San Francisco in 2 years for another job or back to your family. If you're not staying in New York long term, then buying might not be in the cards for you right now. Next slide. So now that your team is assembled, you got your big three, right? Your attorney, your mortgage professional, and your real estate broker. There are a couple other people you might need, but these are people that we have relationship with: contractor, architect, inspector. Those are the people that you need after you usually get your offer accepted, unless you're buying something that needs a ton of work. You need a contractor to come in ahead of time and make sure that the building's not going to fall down and you can do the work you want to do. Then you've assembled your team. Next slide. The first thing you do, even though you may be perusing on StreetEasy or Zillow, is call a mortgage professional. And just because you did a calculator online, does not mean a bank is going to loan for you what you think. You know, I have my 20%. I have lots of money to put down, but maybe my credit score is not great. Maybe my income has only been verified for 1 year. Knowing exactly what you can afford and what a bank's going to loan to you for is super important when you start this process. So the first thing you're going to do is going to call your mortgage professional, and that is Lisa. Take it away, Lisa, to talk about financing.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, someone's phone's on. So yes, the first thing you want to do is get pre-approved. The reason why that is important is because it's really important to know what you can afford. Not just what you personally can afford, but what you can borrow from the bank, because that's going to help you understand what you can look for and what you can find that fits within your budget. So why you want to get pre-approved first is because you don't want to oversell yourself and maybe look at things that are beyond your budget. You also don't want to undersell yourself and look at things that maybe are below how much you can actually get pre-approved for. So that's why it's really important to get pre-approved first. Getting pre-approved, it's actually a pretty personal process. I'm going to have a really detailed conversation with you. I'm going to talk to you about what you're looking for, about what your savings are like, about your job history, about if this is going to be a home you're going to stay in for a little while or for a long while. This is all important because it helps me understand sort of the best product for you. And I think what makes me and my team sort of stand out along with our customer service is just that we have a lot of different products. So I can find the right product for you rather than just sort of telling you our 130-year product and this is what it's going to look like. After I get some documents from you, I am going to run your credit. I'm going to talk to you about your liabilities, and then I'm going to get you a pre-approval. That pre-approval is really a working draft. So as you start to look at things with Victoria, you'll get an idea of really what you're looking at. Maybe when we first talked, you were thinking a condo, and now you're thinking a co-op. Maybe initially you were talking about a single family, and now you're thinking about a two-family. This can all sort of change as you are looking to put an offer on a place. A few things about products. Conventionally, the standard is to put 20% down. You can put down 10%. You can put down as little as 3.5%. If you're putting down 3.5%, it's called FHA. There are purchase price limitations for FHA that we can talk about. It depends on if it's a condo or if it's a 2-unit, if it's in New York City or if it's somewhere else. 10% down is I saw someone in the chat mention 10% down. That's a really awesome product right now because mortgage insurance is very inexpensive. So that's a possibility. I think the question is sort of to work with Victoria or your realtor to make it the most compelling offer if you're putting 10% down. But the other thing I'll tell you is that rates are still ridiculously low. We're going on almost over a year within the low 3s-ish, which is sort of unprecedented. So this is a really good time to think about either buying or get yourself in a position to buy in a year or two. So Victoria, I think I'll switch it back to you unless you have any questions.
No, I don't think so. Thanks so much, Lisa. The one thing that I will just remind everybody that I know I said a minute ago is to hire New York City professional experts. You don't want to be hiring Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans. They don't understand co-ops. They don't understand the nuances of New York City. That's why, again, don't hire your uncle. Make sure you get someone that is practicing New York City real estate law and is a mortgage professional that is familiar with the New York City market. It's just super imperative that you don't make things more difficult or challenging by hiring people that are not experts in this field.
Victoria, can I actually just say one more thing because you
Go
reminded me? So the other thing is if you're looking to buy a co-op, they are a different kettle of fish, and you need to make sure that you're working with a team and with a lender that understands co-ops. So that is definitely something to bring up in the conversation as you're talking with sort of the team you want to put together. And also self-employed borrowers. I work with self-employed borrowers a lot. It's totally possible to get qualified for a loan if you're self-employed, but you need to have a conversation with someone sooner rather than later so that we can make sure everything's ready to go, if not now, then in the next tax year. So don't be scared if you're self-employed. You can get a loan, but it does take a little bit more of a conversation with a mortgage professional.
Somebody asked, and I'm just gonna, Mars, I'm gonna wait and have that question at the end, but Lisa, do you want to look at the question in the chat and be prepared to answer it about somebody that wants to refinance and to potentially buy in New York City that has property in California? Farah, next slide. So where do you search? So one challenging thing about New York City is that we don't have a all-encompassing MLS, but REBNY, which is the Real Estate Board of New York, you may have heard of them, is working with CoStar, which is a national platform, to create a New York City MLS, hopefully to compete with StreetEasy, because that's been one of the biggest challenges I know for New York City real estate brokers and for tenants alike and buyers and sellers. So once that happens, hopefully this spring, then there'll be one platform. But for right now, you have to go on Zillow and Realtor.com and StreetEasy to populate everything that there is, because it's all not in one place. Even brokers still are frustrated with this process. We do have access to a back end, but it still will not be as all-encompassing. It's one of the problems of the search, but that's where you're looking right now. We're going to set up that search for you. And I would say, do not trust any of the information also on these sites. Taxes are usually wrong. If it's Zillow constantly puts co-ops as condos. So you want to just be double checking with your real estate professional about the listings and information you're seeing to make sure you can afford them and that the numbers are correct so that you can make a decision about if you want to see the property. So we'll aggregate results for you. You'll get an email from us with our aggregated backend results, but brokers that are not part of REBNY and are not putting their listings on the MLS that we do use, you're not going to get those properties populated. Are there still, people always ask if there's still like off-market listings. Brokers, we sent one out this week, and brokers are still doing this, is sending out emails to other brokers that they've worked with and say, hey, I'm going to have this thing come up, or, hey, I'm going to be putting this on the market in 2 or 3 weeks. Do you have anybody for it? That's sort of the like Craigslist, Village Voice. What else there used to be, for sale by owner things that used to come out that you used to have access to before everything the internet sort of changes all of that. So there are still off-market listings for those brokers that work in a sort of inner circle and have access to that. The days are over of the off-market listings. Keep in mind that sellers agents represent the financial best interest of the seller. So when you show up, they're there representing the seller and trying to get the most money in terms that the seller wants for the seller. And they don't have your best interest at heart. You can come up and end up losing more money than you'll save by not understanding the the process as well as you should. And a buyer's broker represents you and your best interests. They're included in your closing costs, so you might as well take advantage of them. So finding your dream home. Next slide, please. How do you narrow down what neighborhood you want to live in? Sometimes it's the neighborhood you already live in, right? You love living in Park Slope because it's close to the park and it's got great schools. And I didn't say that. I'm not allowed to talk about schools. It's got that brownstone Brooklyn life that you want, and you're living in a co-op that has a doorman. Are you going to be able to find those things if you really wanted to stay in a co-op with a doorman in other neighborhoods? Prospect Heights, yes, but you're not going to find a lot of co-ops in Williamsburg or find doormen in Williamsburg unless it's a ring or some sort of not physical person, not a human being. It'd be a robot. So finding what you're looking for in a property is all part of narrowing it down to get into that specific neighborhood that not only has the neighborhood attributes, but also has the building typology to get you the property that you want. So I kind of went over that. If you want to live in Williamsburg, you want to co-op, it would be hard. I always tell people to make their list of 5 deal breakers and then realize you're probably going to only get 2 or 3 of those things. Just really difficult to find a property that has everything that people are looking for. The other thing to calculate is closing costs. So even though you can afford the 20% down, you need to have money in your budget to also cover closing costs, and they can range. And so that's why thinking about if you're going to buy a co-op or a condo, you need to average in the closing costs as well to the process so that you know you can afford the property you're looking at. So closing costs for co-ops are 1 to 3% for closing costs, average like $4,000. Condos 3 to 5%. New construction can be all over the place. And as a seller, your closing costs are about 8%. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at different building typologies, co-op or condos. One's going to be prices on co-ops are going to be less, closing costs are going to be less, but you're going to have restrictions on renting things out. Condos costs will be more and closing costs will be more, but you're going to have less restrictions. So that's something to just keep in mind when you're thinking about if you want to buy a co-op or condo. And I think we have a good co-op or condo comparison document that we can get into. Next slide. There is not an average HOA fee for Brooklyn. All the different properties. So somebody asked, sorry if people aren't looking at the chat, is there an idea to have an average HOA fees in Brooklyn? So the maintenance or the management fees for a co-op or condo vary on every single property. You cannot have an average. Too many things are happening at once. I'm sorry. And so it depends on the building is self-managed, if what the taxes are, if there's an underlying mortgage, if it's a co-op. Rashida, do you want to talk real quickly before I get into making an offer about how people look at the maintenance or HOA fees?
Yes, yeah, there really isn't a kind of like an average, because whether you're looking at a condo or co-op, basically it's the cost of that particular building, because those monthly fees are really the carrying costs for that condominium or for the co-op. Some condos, for instance, your water, your heat, your gas may be included, in addition to management company, the electricity for the common areas, any supers or things like that. And then for a co-op, your maintenance includes water, heat, electricity for the common areas. It may also include sometimes cable. It may also include the real estate taxes for the building itself. So not really an average, but the main thing that once you put it in your offer, you do want to make sure that it either is in the listing what the common charge of the maintenance is, and then when your attorney is doing the due diligence, your attorney can ask for a history. Typically, I like to go back for the last 5 years to see what their increases have been regarding your common charges and your maintenance for that particular building. So you kind of have an idea on whether you're going to have potential increases in the future.
Great, thank you so much. So now you've been looking and you find the property and you want to put the offer in. Hopefully at this point, I've prepped you enough so that you already have the 3 things that I need to get your offer in. That is your revenue submit offer form, which will have your information, a list of your income and your debts and where your funds are coming from, your job, and then the amount you're offering and the other broker's information, as well as your lawyer's information. A cover letter talking about how amazing you are and also how amazing the apartment is, and that whoever owns it must also be amazing. And thank you for the opportunity for letting them possibly live here. And you want to be really gushing and pull on as many heartstrings as you possibly can, if that's what the other brokers indicated to me will motivate the seller. Some of them just say, this is a investment. They don't care. They just care about the money. So I'm going to call ahead of time and get some intel to figure out what speaks to them, so that we can fine tune our offer to reflect that. So not all offer strategies are going to be the same. Now, my job really is to help you create an offer strategy to figure out how we're going to negotiate and get you this property to be yours. The other thing that you're going to need is your pre-approval letter that you got from Lisa. So that's why it's super important to start this process early as you can, so that we can get you prepared and hit the ground running with a great start, and not just then miss out on something you fall in love with because you're not prepared. One of the main reasons of working with the buyer broker is provide the relationship of knowledge of other agents. So the nice thing is right now I'm doing several deals with other brokers that I already have done deals with recently. And so that really, I think, has helped my clients win the bid, because the other broker can say, oh, pick Victoria's clients. I've worked with her. She's going to make sure that this, and this happens. And we're going to have a smooth transaction, and we're going to close, and there aren't going to be any hurdles. That's one of the reasons you want to pick somebody that has experience. You want to pick, every person you pick should have experience. So your mortgage professional, your lawyer, your real estate broker, you want people that are seasoned and experts in this field, and that they have a long track record of closing deals, and people know who they are. It's a real competitive advantage on all fronts. Like I said, we were talking about your negotiation strategy and devise a strategy to get you the property. Everything needs to be negotiated beforehand, and how you get to accepted offer. Then a deal sheet gets submitted to the lawyers, and all the terms are written out on the deal sheet. So contract terms are different from the deal terms. You might have win a bidding war, you offer above asking price, but then you need to negotiate things in, like a appraisal contingency, financing contingency, an inspection and contingency. Understanding those terms and what you're offering at the time is super important. And then if your offer is accepted, we have an inspection. I'm going to pass to Lisa and Rashida to talk about this part of the transaction. And also just Rashida, if you could talk about what as is sale is. That's always something that gets tripped up when we're negotiating for these deals.
So negotiating, now you've negotiated the offer. One of the things about New York, which is different than like other states like New Jersey, is that your offer, even though you put in an offer and it's been accepted, you're not in contract. So either party can walk away from the deal. It's not binding until the contract is actually fully signed by both parties and the down payment is given. So even though you've negotiated everything, the deal sheet has gone out, you can back out, the seller can back out, no one's obligated. So that deal sheet goes out with kind of like the basic terms, what the purchase price is, all the information for the seller's attorney and the buyer's attorney, the name of your loan officer, if you're getting a mortgage, and all of that is now put into a contract, which is initially prepared by the seller's attorney and then sent over to the buyer's attorney to review and make sure there's any other additional provisions. Prior to you signing that contract, prior to you doing anything, your first step is whether you're buying a co-op or a condo or a house, is getting an inspection. Some people say if you're buying a co-op or a condo, you may not need an inspection. I do consider that you should get an inspection because you're still buying into something and you want to know what's going on in that unit, even if it's a co-op or a condo. So that inspection happens prior to you signing. While you're doing this inspection, your attorney is reviewing the contract of sale. You want to make sure, your attorney wants to make sure if you're getting a mortgage, that there's a mortgage contingency. Basically, that means that if you're not able to get your mortgage, you have a right to cancel the contract and get the return of your deposit. The second contingency in a contract, whether it's a condo or a house, is that there's good title to the property, and also for a co-op. So that means the seller has the right to sell. There's no liens or judgments or anything on the property that prevents them from selling you the from the house or condo or co-op. If there is, then the seller can't give you good title. You have a right to cancel, get the return of your deposit. Another thing that comes up is as is. As is not a contingency, but it specifically states that you understand you've done your inspection or you've waived your inspection, and you understand that the property is being sold to you in as is condition. That means that if it was broken when you saw the property, the seller can leave it broken until for the closing. So you can't go back and say, hey, I saw this property only once. I didn't realize that there was a broken window. I didn't do an inspection. I want you to fix the window. The seller comes back and says, no, it's as is. That window was broken when I put the property on the market. So you're taking it like that. Your general contract will have basically terms that plumbing, electrical, heating systems will be in working order. Your attorney will try to put in additional provisions that there hasn't been any leaks into the unit or into the house, that there's no bed bugs. So these things can be added, but always have to understand that that's why the inspection is so important, because even if things are added, if it was like that and it's not changed in the contract, then it falls under that as is provision. So when you're negotiating that offer, your offer has been accepted, you've done your inspection, now you find out, hey, the electrical needs upgrading, or the plumbing isn't right, or the roof is leaking if you're buying a house. Now you can go back and say, hey, I need these things to be fixed, which now means those provisions have to be added to the contract of sale. Or you can go back and say, I want a reduction in the price that I offered, because now it's going to be my expense to fix these items. And then that can be also, the price can be lowered. So once again, your offer is just an initial offer. It's been accepted, but the terms are not finalized. Contract is not finalized until it's actually signed by both parties, and things can change during that time from when your offer is accepted and before you go into contract.
So let's just go right into getting into contract. And what happens doing your due diligence, setting the closing dates and timelines.
Mm-hmm. So getting into contract. So now you've done your inspection. Whether if you're buying a house, if you're buying a co-op or a condo, your attorney has to do what we call as due diligence. That can take up to a week, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the building. But that due diligence is reviewing the documents for the building. That's the offering plan, the financials, the board meeting minutes. Because great, you love the unit itself, but you need to find out, is this building financially sound? Are there upcoming assessments? Is there litigation? Is there, fire issues going on? So these are the things that happen in that due diligence period. And it's very important, because once you sign that contract, if there's a maintenance increase, you're subject to that. If you close and they turn out they have to do $1 million assessment, now that becomes their responsibility. Now you can't find out everything in that due diligence. It's only the amount of information that's available for that property, but going into, you try to get as much information as possible so you have an educated understanding of what type of property you're buying. Your contract is going to have your mortgage contingency, which we always want to hopefully make sure that there's an appraisal contingency in there, because what happens if if the property doesn't appraise and you've taken out that, or you waive that appraisal contingency? Do you have the extra funds to come up with that extra amount of money to go ahead with the purchase, or you can lose your deposit? Because remember, your deposit is what's on the line once you sign that contract of sale. So you want to go in fully understanding the grounds on when you can cancel and the grounds that you cannot cancel. Changing your mind is not a ground. Your down payment can be lost, but if it doesn't appraise and there's an appraisal contingency, you can get the return of your deposit if the seller doesn't want to reduce the price.
Lisa, do you have anything to add in about the getting into contract period?
Well, yeah, just the appraisal. If appraisals come in low, it's not that common in the city right now. It's more common in like the Westchester and Connecticut areas, but it can happen in the city as well. Rashida's 100% right. There is the option of getting a seller to reduce the price or give them a seller's concession. There's also the option of mortgage insurance. So the first thing I do if an appraisal comes in low is one of my managers used to be an appraiser. So I have him take a look at it and tell me like, does this look good? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, no, that's pretty solid. Sometimes appraisers can be a little lazy. And so then we can push back a little bit and say, hey, I think it should be a better value because of this and this. But like I mentioned at the beginning, mortgage insurance is really affordable right now. So the takeaway is if the appraisal comes in low, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to come up with another $20,000. That may mean like a deal I have right now, you have a mortgage insurance of $30 a month for about 3 more years, and then it's done because of where the appraised value came in. So it's just something to have a conversation with about your mortgage, with your mortgage professional, if that becomes an issue.
So then we get into contract and a couple different things happen. There is due diligence from the bank and due diligence from the attorney. But for me, most of the time, is when the only part of this part of the transaction that I participate in after the inspection is doing your co-op board package. I'm gonna work with you to create a beautiful co-op board package so that the board is just waving you in and can't wait for you to be your neighbors. And you'll have to also prepare for an interview and that sort, but that doesn't usually happen until we submit your board package. We can't submit your board package until we have your commitment letter. And that's why we need Lisa to do all the due diligence on her end and get all the paperwork into the bank. I think you want to talk about, Lisa, the due diligence, the turn times, underwriting, and locking rate here. And then we can pass it back to Rashida.
So Rashida's done an awesome job. She's got you through due diligence and got you in contract. So you know what you're signing and you know what you're protected in and when your closing and commitment date is. You immediately send that contract to me because now this is a live deal, which means that I order the appraisal and I get this deal ready for underwriting. Because I've demanded a lot from you up front, so I have a lot of your documents. We are almost halfway there in getting you to underwriting, and that is sort of intentional. I talk to Victoria and Rashida and look at me online, you'll know like my underwriting turn times are awesome. And they're awesome for about 3 reasons. First of all, I have amazing underwriters. Second of all, I have an awesome team. And third of all, I make sure you guys get me what I need. And all of that comes together so that you go through underwriting as I tell everyone, as quickly and painlessly as possible. And that's really important because the underwriter is the person who looks at the loan and says to the bank, yep, this is good. It has my stamp of approval. It meets the guidelines necessary for this loan. And that's really important because like Victoria said, if you're looking at a co-op or a condo, especially a co-op, you're not going to be able to set up your board interview. You're not going to be able to get any further to closing until you have that mortgage commitment letter. So the faster you have that, the better. Along with the appraisal and getting you ready to underwriting, we're going to talk about, you're going to start shopping around for homeowners insurance. If you're buying a home, you need to find homeowners insurance. You need to pay for the policy up front, either prior to or at closing. And when that commitment comes, it will be shared with you, with Victoria, with Rashida. They will do their jobs in terms of getting what needs to get done for closing. And there'll be a few conditions. Usually it's nothing super major. It's just maybe an updated document or a question about a document. And then we'll get you in the clear to close.
Great. And so Rashida, just then covering title search, Aztec agreements, and that sort of due diligence once we're in contract.
Mm-hmm. So I forgot to mention one of the things about when you get in contract is your time frames. And I know Lisa touched on that regarding, we know that you have to get your mortgage. Your standard contract is going to have 30 or 45 days for you to get your mortgage commitment. If you're buying a house or a condo, your closing time period would probably be on or about 60 days. Typically, you can close within that 60 days for a co-op, for a condo or a house. If you're buying a co-op, you have a longer time period because you have to get that you have to get that mortgage commitment, which is, let's say, 30 to 45 days. Then you have to submit that application to the board, which is roughly another 2 weeks. Then you have to wait for the board to interview you, or the management company to review the application, then schedule you for an interview. Then after that, the clearance to close, scheduling the closing, and then close. So you're looking at, for a co-op, roughly about a 90-day process. So the main thing that I say for first-time buyers is timing is everything. So don't schedule closings. Don't schedule moves. You want to make sure that you understand your time periods. Also, when you're locking in your rate, you're not doing a 30-day lock on a co-op because you're not going to close in 30 days. Typically, you're not going to be closing in 30 days for a house or a condo, if it is possible, but you definitely want to have a conversation when you're locking in your interest rates to make sure that you understand that on or about time period and your timing for closing. When you're in contract, if you're buying a co-op, there's a bank attorney that's assigned to the file. They have to prepare what we call the recognition agreements, which is the co-op recognizing that you're taking out a loan on the property. It means that if you default under your loan, the bank has a right to notify the co-op. And if you default under the payment of your maintenance, the co-op has a right to notify the bank. So everyone's involved and understands what's going on with the unit. I think what else we were talking about with the due diligence?
Title search, you did
Title
that.
search, yes. So we also have to do a title search on the premises, which is basically making sure that, once again, there's no judgments or liens. A big thing, as your attorney, I can do but so much research on the property, getting into contract. But the title company, they go to the Department of Buildings, they look up this property records. So they're making sure that everything in that chain of ownership was correct. And sometimes there's things that come up like violations, sidewalk liens that have to be taken care of. And even though you have that time period of on or about 60 days, you can be ready to close. But if the seller doesn't have clear title, you cannot close, and that delays your closing as well. So once again, it's all about understanding these time periods. New York, on or about means you have a 30-day built-in grace period, and that can go both for the buyer and that can go both for the seller. So even if you're ready to close as a buyer, if the seller isn't ready to close, you cannot force that seller to close on that day of the closing if it's on or about. So you have to definitely understand that. But once we have good title, you got approval by the board, you got your condo waiver, you're clear to close. Your closing date is scheduling it with all the parties, which is a juggling act in itself, to get everyone to the table at the same day and the same time, which typically takes about 2 weeks to schedule a closing after the clearance is issued, which is also something that you have to understand. So just be patient, I tell clients, when it comes to scheduling, and understand that you do have rate issues and everyone tries to get you to the closing table, but sometimes we just cannot get everyone in there at the same time, at the same day, and we have to be flexible.
So I just want to jump in because that was about rate, and also just about, I think this is where it's really important to talk about team. So like Rashida said, there are so many balls on the court in terms of getting a deal closed and making sure that any delays are dealt with, that everybody always wants to know, like, when can I lock? When's the best rate, et cetera, et cetera. And I totally get it. And what I tell everyone is, I'm going to give you the best rate that's possible, but it's also a little bit of a dance, because if it's a co-op, we're not going to lock you up front, because it could take 30 days for an interview. It could take 2 months for an interview. We need to wait till a little bit further in the process to know what's going on. Similar with title issues. So it's a bit of a dance to get you in the right rate lock and also to get you closed in the right amount of time. And that's why it's really, really important to work with a team that works together, that all talks to each other. Because before I lock the deal, the first thing I do is I talk to Rashida and I talk to Victoria. And I say, okay, Rashida, how's title? How's it looking for an ETA to closing? Do you think we can close this in 30 days? Victoria, how are we on board approval? What's the ETA with the co-op interview? Because these are all really, really important questions that your team's going to be able to answer that you might not, because you don't know the answers to those questions.
We just dealt with a lot of this today, calling the other brokers and the
God.
management companies, tracking down documents. We just have 2 deals right now that both have had litigation in the buildings, and it's causing a lot of delays. Then not on top of them having litigation issues, the management companies are unresponsive, are not getting us the documents we need, and just slowing down. Like there's one of these deals we should have closed like weeks ago. So it's just it's moving faster because we all work together, is just not feasible if you don't have a team that knows how to communicate and work together to get what is needed to get us to closing. So that is just super important. And I appreciate Lisa bringing up that point of the transaction where we rely on each other a lot. So the attorneys are going to schedule your closing. You are going to do something called the final walkthrough. I go to that with you usually, and we make sure that, just like Rashida was talking about, that the property is being delivered how you expect it to be, that when we saw the unit listed and we did our inspection, that all of the issues we brought up have been addressed, or that there's no new things that have shown up out of nowhere during the process. So that happens 24 to 72 hours before the closing. So if there is an issue, you can bring it up and it can be addressed before the closing. Then you go to closing. And this is the other part of the process where you have to be patient for, because I know Rashida just, everybody wants to get their closing scheduled, but then you might not get all of the information about what checks and you need to bring to the closing till the day before. No, everybody wants to be super prepared and go to the bank like a week before, but as they're calculating the numbers, you just might not get them. And you might have to go to the bank and get certified checks the morning of your closing, because you need certified checks. You also need to bring your photo ID, your checkbook, anything else. And then you should be prepared to be there for maybe up to 2 hours, because sometimes that's how long it takes. And you want to have a limber wrist, because you'll be signing every piece of paper that has to come through. If you're doing a co-op, there's a co-op board interview and some other things to go through, but really we have gone over the beginning to the end of this process. And some of the things that you get when working with me and this group is access to our library of resources that I don't post publicly. We have tons of information on our blog, but we do everything through a project management tool called Basecamp, where all of our resources are aligned with each part of the process. We do our backend database that, pulls all the listings for you. And I'm going to send everybody on this call by our handbook, so you can delve into all the information that we didn't get to cover, because this is just one small snippet, an overview of the process, and the details come out later. So I'm going to end the presentation, but we're going to open up and go back to some of the questions you had. And if you want to follow up, my assistant Farah has been tracking the questions we've had so far to go back to, so that you can schedule a call with us to talk about anything specific. So I think I saw earlier on that somebody asked about down payment for investment. So buying a home to live in and buying an investment property are 2 different things. And I'm going to let Lisa talk about the difference between buying an investment property and buying a home.
Sure. So sorry, I was just looking at the question. So for an investment, typically to get the best rate and the best terms, you're going to have to look at 25% down for a down payment. Might be able to do less than that depending on the details of the file, but the standard is 25% down. That down payment cannot be a gift if it's an investment property. So if, for example, you have a parent helping you with the down payment of buying an investment property, that parent needs to be on the loan. They cannot give you the money as a gift. That said, also with an investment property, you can use rental income to help you qualify. So I think, it's a matter of reaching out to me to have a little bit of more of a discussion of what you're looking at. But typically, to get the best rate possible, you're looking at 25% down. And
you're also, the rates usually aren't as competitive. So if you probably wouldn't get 3% for an investment property.
Right. And the level it goes in terms of rate is primary Second home, investment. Investment is the biggest risk for a bank. So it's going to be the highest rate. It's still great compared with 2 years ago. When I bought an investment property 2 years ago, it was 5%, which was a great deal at the time. It's now less than 4%. So it's still great, but you just have to realize that's sort of the game you're playing.
And someone asked about getting pre-approved if they're living in the same household, but they're not married, I'm assuming. Do they do combined credit income or pre-approved separately? So if you'd only do it separately if you didn't want to own together. If you're buying something together, you're going to get considered to get all your assets together. Correct, Lisa?
Yes, if you're buying something together and you're living in this, you're moving into the same place together, we are qualifying you together.
Did that answer your question, Kelsey? And am I missing? Yes, thank you. Okay, so am I missing any of the questions in this chat that we might not
There
have
was one
covered?
about refinancing in California.
Oh yeah, somebody asked about trying to take some of their equity, I guess, out of their property in California to buy something here in New York.
Right. So, and the person lives abroad. So definitely reach out to me because I actually work with people who live abroad all the time. I work with a lot of foreign service officers. It can be a little tricky in terms of where you're living and if we're closing while you're abroad. So let's talk about it. But in terms of your general scenario, refinancing, pulling equity out of a place in California to buy a place in New York is 100% possible. So, yeah, just reach out to me because there are some issues in terms of getting docs signed and stuff, but we can make it work. I actually, 2 months ago, I closed a deal with a person lived in Paris. It was really cool. We overnighted the docs to the embassy in Paris for them to sign.
How fun is that? I want to go. Okay, well, so I gave you a really brief overview. I feel like I rushed through it just a little because last time our presentation went over an hour because just people had such detail-oriented questions. So is there any other questions that we might not have reviewed to go back to today? Okay, great. We did it under an hour. I'm so proud of us, guys. Everybody, you guys know, you're going to get a follow-up email with some resources, our home buying guide, a link to this presentation that goes on YouTube. Go ahead and share it around. We do one of these every month. So if you have anybody that's also interested in buying, go ahead and share this with them. And if you want to set up a call, Farrah left a link for that too. And yeah, I talked about all the resources that we provide when you work together. So that's that. And everybody have a good Tuesday night evening. Thank you.
Thank you.